Joining us now, Republican Congressman Randy Fine from Florida. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs and Education Committees. Good morning to you. As we said, we've got lawmakers on both sides of the aisle speaking out, including your Republican colleagues. Republican Senator Tim Scott called this post the most racist thing to come out of this White House. Do you think President Trump should apologize, or should somebody be held responsible here?
No, look, I think this is much ado about nothing. It took me a long time to find the video because there's not a video. It's a 1 second blip in a 1 minute video about education fraud. I think the racism that we need to be focused on right now is the fact that next week, as we intend to create election security in this country, Democrats are saying that black people don't have the ability to get voter IDs. I mean, that's real racism in our society. It's not just some sort of mistaken post where some blip showed up in a video about something else.
As I said, though, we've got Democrats who are calling for accountability this morning. I mean, the post is all over social media, Congressman. Should somebody be held accountable here?
I reject the premise. The post is not all over social media. What people do is they take a screenshot of this 1 second. It's very hard to find the video. It took me about 20 minutes yesterday because it is not a video about racism. It's this 1 second blip that popped up at the end of a 1 minute video on a completely separate topic. I don't think the president intended to post it. But the blip is the issue, Congressman. Yeah, I understand, but I don't think the president intended to post it. And I'm concerned about real racism in this country, where half the people I serve with believe that black people are not capable of getting a photo identification. And that's disgusting philosophy that we should all be upset about, not just some sort of mistaken blip in a video.
So the president condemned the post. Do you?
I think the president said he didn't intend to post it. I wouldn't have done it, but I also can understand this guy watching 30 seconds of a video thinking it was appropriate and posting it. I don't think anyone believes that the president wanted to secretly post a 1 second blip of a Lion King video in the minute of a 1 minute video on a completely unrelated subject. I think this is much ado about nothing.
Okay, let's move on to the talks between the U.S. and Iran yesterday. The talks between both nations, President Trump demanding zero nuclear capability from the Iranian regime. Iran state media pretty much saying that's a non-starter for us. How good were these talks yesterday?
Well, look, I admire the president for trying. When you're talking about negotiating with Muslim terrorists, I don't expect to get a good result. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. I think the president is giving them one last chance at a peaceful resolution before it's resolved using other means. But the Iranian government has killed thousands, if not tens of thousands of their own citizens, something I find highly surprising. I don't see Democrats screaming about like when there was the war with Gaza. So I think you've got bad people in charge of Iran. I admire the president for trying to resolve it through discussion. If it doesn't happen, it'll be resolved in other ways.
To that point, Congressman, right after the talks ended, the Trump administration announced new sanctions on Iranian oil. What kind of impact could that have for us here in the U.S.?
I think relatively low because we don't get oil from Iran. And as you've seen in this country, gas prices have come down quite a bit since President Trump became president. I think what we need to be doing is be putting maximum pressure we can on Iran, because were Iran to become great again, were the people of Iran be able to run Iran, not a small group of Muslim terrorists, that would be an incredible good for the entire world in terms of reducing terrorism, volatility. Most of the Muslim terrorism you see around the world is funded in part by Iran. So getting rid of that threat is an unambiguous good for all of us.
These talks also expected to continue early next week.
And I'm sure they will. I mean, I hope the president gets the job done. I think he's trying his best.
Right now, the U.S. has an armada of warships and fighter planes near Iran, similar to the buildup near Venezuela. President Trump says they're there because they, quote, they have to float somewhere. Is this part of the pressure campaign you were talking about?
Well, it is true they have to be somewhere, but I also think that's true. I think Iran needs to understand that force is not off the table. I don't think I'm saying anything newsworthy there. I mean, I believe that the Iranian regime needs to get in line with the rest of the world, stop shooting its own people, stop funding terrorism, stop trying to build a nuclear weapon. And I think the president's making clear that all options to stop that are on the table. Now, if he wasn't interested in diplomacy, he wouldn't be sending diplomats there. But people need to understand there will be consequences if those efforts fail.
Iran, though, has also said that they want these conversations to happen with mediators without threats. So is this the right message as we're trying to have these conversations again continuing early next week?
So when the United States wouldn't talk directly with Iran, it was Iran's position that they wanted direct conversations with the United States. Look, part of what you have going on here is them saying anything they can to delay. So I think that's a bunch of nonsense.
I also want to ask you, too, back here at home, President Trump pushing the Save America Act. This would require voters to show proof of citizenship in person to register to vote in federal elections, require photo ID for voting. That you were talking about earlier at the start of this interview. You support passing this act. How will this actually change elections here in the U.S.?
Sure. Well, I think there's nothing we can do more important in protecting our elections. Virtually every country in the world requires people to show a photo ID in order to show that they vote. We require it for almost every activity that we do. Yet somehow when it comes to voting, Democrats say only in blue states, by the way, that it is impossible to do. We have voter ID in Florida, have had since I first got elected 10 years ago. There are no issues. The other thing we're going to require is that people prove that they're citizens in order to vote. When Democrats started throwing open the voter rolls to anybody who signed up, we ended up with illegals being registered to vote. We see this in Florida where we have to remove people from the rolls who inadvertently got signed up. And then when they get a jury duty notice, they call and say, I can't be on jury duty. I'm not a citizen. Yet somehow they got registered to vote. This is a real problem. Americans deserve to have confidence in their elections, and I'm confident we'll pass it next week out of the House.
Congressman Randy Fine, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we've got a lot